Welcome, thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today I'm going to share with you in the latest of my deep dive videos a truly powerful and significant event. It's the Cancer solstice, the summer solstice in terms of the northern hemisphere, but the winter solstice in terms of the south. But in terms of the astrology, this brings in Cardinal Quadrant 2. Western tropical astrology is predicated on the seasons, and the first event is the vernal equinox, which sees the sun move into the sign of Aries, where it's exalted. That's the first cardinal quadrant, and that brings in 13 weeks when we can initiate, get on the front foot and see where it takes us. The sign of Cancer, also cardinal, so it's another cardinal quadrant for the next 13 weeks. It's very much about consolidation. It's about our security, about nurture. It's about our environment, about our feelings. So a very different perspective to that Aries energy, but nonetheless hugely important. But this year, as the sun makes its way into Cancer and ushers in Cardinal Quadrant 2, so Venus and Mercury are laying in wait, and that welcoming committee is truly lovely. But the energies of Neptune and Pluto are incredibly powerful on this particular year's Cardinal Quadrant 2. Stay with me as I unpack all of this for you. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have your company. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please feel welcome to share them. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions, as always, are truly appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, as I've been sharing, about 50% of people who regularly enjoy my work are not subscribers. Please click that subscription button and help the channel to grow. Also, if you click or tap on the bell notification symbol, every time I drop a video, YouTube should let you know. I'm a consultant astrologer. If you'd like to check out how people are found working with me, I don't alter people's testimonials as they come in. I share as is. Please see the link below. Like to have your free daily horoscope fired to your device each morning? You can do so by clicking on the subscription link beneath this video. I've been doing these for a very long time, but also I provide an overview of each day from an astrological viewpoint, the most weighty influence. So that helps us to see the big picture as well as enjoy our zodiac forecast for our ascendant, sun or the moon. Also, if you are a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. Patrons get extra information, so I will share a download about the 4 cardinal quadrants that you can relate to and helps you to see the big picture of how Western tropical astrology works. Because unlike sidereal or Vedic astrology, it doesn't take into account the precession of the equinoxes and the tilt of the Earth. And as you know, there's about a 23-day difference between the two different astrological systems. But actually, Western tropical astrology comes out very, very well in terms of forecasting in relation to other systems. Now, also, I'm going to go on to share with you the event chart from a solar perspective, but also from a natal perspective, using Placidus, the proportional house system, and based on Greenwich, not because I'm in the UK, but that's because that's where the prime meridian is, and also using universal time, not British time at the present time. And that helps us to see things in a different way. So please stay with me for that. And then I will go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces, so you can enjoy and relate to your ascendant, sun or the moon. If you would like to embrace more serious astrology and unlock the secrets of your life, this is also an opportunity to take advantage of my special packages. Your Life Roadmap Report can help you to gain fantastic insights, but also to understand the patterns that have repeated in your life so far and how you can work with them more effectively future forwards. Also, you'll get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. If you know your tropical astrology well, why not check out my Draconic package, your soul or karmic reports. Again, please see below, 30% off both. So the summer solstice, the Cancer solstice, occurs on June the 20th at 8:51 p.m. Universal Time. Now, as I mentioned, because I do like to be very respectful to my viewers in the southern hemisphere, this will be the winter solstice for you. But we have to be honest, Western tropical astrology is a Mediterranean construct. So that's why I'm talking about the summer solstice. It's not to be in any way unkind or unaware of that difference. So in terms of the astrology, the sun moves into the sign of Cancer. And as I mentioned in the introduction, the sign of Cancer is ruled by the moon. So it's very much about how we feel, our immediate environment. Can be to do with being more protective, perhaps more careful of where we're spending our time. We've had a very busy, almost hectic period with a big cluster of energy, a stellium, in the sign of Gemini, including Jupiter, of course, for the first time in 12 years. But they've been conflicted quite badly by Saturn and also Neptune in Pisces. So as much as there's been the opportunity to have bubbly interactions, I think they've been snared by things that we don't necessarily easily see. For example, our subconscious, our deep dreams, our hidden motivations, or the motivations of other people. Sometimes when we blurt something out quickly in a very Gemini, fast, amusing, sometimes pivoting way, maybe at times we're masking how things feel. So what this Cancer event encourages us to do, particularly with Venus and Mercury in Cancer awaiting, is get in touch with how it feels. Now that's going to be really powerful for the first 4 weeks of this cardinal quadrant, but the next one, the autumnal equinox, occurs on the 22nd of September. That's cardinal quadrant 3, and the final one in Capricorn on December the 21st. So those 4 divisions are called cardinal quadrants because, of course, each of the zodiac signs involved are actually cardinal signs. But there is an astrophysical dimension to using that phrase, but I'll just work with the astrology. So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart from a solar perspective. And you can see there's the sun just over that 4th house cusp. And obviously very close to it is Venus, Mercury, and also the part of fortune. You can see on the chart there's also the descendant, but that's really more about the natal chart from a Placidus viewpoint, because we're imagining the chart in an overall way that we can all collectively relate to. So the zodiac starts with Aries at 0 degrees, and therefore the sun is just across that 4th house cusp in Cancer. But look at the role of Pluto up there in the sign of Aquarius. Let's think about Pluto, what it's been meaning for all of us for those 11 weeks last year, when there seemed to be an incredible amount of discussion about artificial intelligence and robotics, which of course have been with us for a long time, but just a lot more narrative around those areas. I haven't noticed that quite so much since Pluto moved into Aquarius on the 21st of January. There's been lots of talk about how we can do things in a more efficient way with their help, perhaps less of a sense of threat somehow. But for sure, Pluto is forging a quincunx within 3 degrees with the sun. Now, that position of the sun as it moves forwards over the next day, it will become much more tight to that quincunx, which is 150 degrees. But Pluto in its retrograde in Aquarius is going to return to Capricorn in terms of universal time on the 1st of September, in the terms of United States, the 2nd of September, where it will be through to the 20th of November, and then back to Aquarius for the long term. It won't come back to Capricorn in our lifetimes. So Pluto in Aquarius is really asking us to think big. It's about our network and our connections collectively. It's also about our future. And of course, the sign of Aquarius can be very futuristic. But not all the three decans of Aquarius are quite revved up like the first 10 degrees. And also the first 2.5 degrees of each sign has another influence called the 12th harmonic, or dwards in Vedic astrology, and therefore the Uranian rulership of the sign of Aquarius is electrifying that influence of Pluto. So it may be in retrograde, we may be having to find new ways of interacting with one another. We're using technology more and more. We can at times feel that we're rather cut off from one another because it's very hard to hear a human voice. We've only got to call up even a big provider of telephony or broadband or utilities or a bank or insurance services, and it's almost impossible to talk to someone. It drives you absolutely nuts because they're so invested in technology and obviously saving a bit of money that they're removing the interface between us as people and our emotions and how we are all joined together. So don't believe that Pluto in Aquarius is a panacea for all of the Earth's ills. Of course, it can be really good if we can become more in touch with seeking truth, which is what Uranus really is about, higher truths. It's the ruler of the sky as well in mythology, so very much in touch with astrology, which is growing, I feel, in its appeal. But that quincunx with Venus, we've already seen from the analogy to do with call centres how much we're not connected. So a 150 degree quincunx means that there's a disassociation in a way between the need of Cancer, the Cancer sun, to feel in touch with emotion and feel secure and nurtured. That's very difficult when there is this wider influence that is actually quite challenging to the whole concept of caring and being in touch and responding to people on an individual basis. So, that's your issue with your telephony, because that's actually slightly different to something that we've programmed the bot to answer through the instant message that's driving us all around the bend. But you know, one of my predictions with Pluto is that these big companies, or some of them that are really smart, will start to get on to the fact that the human dynamic is actually incredibly important, and they will start to restaff those call centres and get much better at their people skills and their interaction, because that will stand them apart from their competitors and that will win them business. So the people who work hard at listening and interacting, the more Cancerian energy, will come out of it well. But just at this point and over these next 13 weeks, we have to be aware that when an event occurs, so the exact minute the sun moves into Cancer, and we have Cardinal Quadrant 2, we have the summer solstice, at that exact moment, Pluto is not being very helpful to the whole meaning of that sensitivity that Cancer collective is wanting us to benefit from. But it's not just that, and there is a unique irony, because Neptune, like the moon, can be very, very sensitive, is in the sign of Pisces, which shares the water triplicity of Cancer. Doesn't it? Well, yes, but it's on the anaretic degree. So it's on that last degree. Of course, Neptune takes 160 degrees to go through its entire cycle. And so next year, when it moves briefly into Aries, it's starting a new epoch. But Neptune's a planet that, you know, really does not get the attention that he deserves in terms of his influence. Let's think about topical stories that are going on, the amount of pollution that's pumping out into the countryside, into our rivers, into our seas, the amount of plastics that are in our seas, because in a way, Pisces can be a bit escapist. We all know that Neptune can be a bit escapist. It's where we may want to avoid a reality by some of the things we eat and drink, and also some of the things that we might imbibe. And that escapism may to some people, seem entirely necessary to cope with the horrible reality of some elements of life. So Neptune in Pisces has not been a panacea. We've seen since 2012 there's been a lot of excesses, and those excesses, particularly to do, for example, with prescription drugs, addiction. It's not all about the things that people might do that give them a little bit of relief. So we mustn't ignore the fact that prescribed medicines can be right mischief makers. And of course the other thing with Neptune is it can be very deceptive. So Neptune, despite being in the water sign of Pisces, is actually in a square with the Sun. And it's been in a square with the Sun for a few days now. And before that it was in a square with Venus, first of all, Mercury, then the Sun in that Gemini collective, and now it's just the Sun. So as we come into this new 13-week period, as much as we might like to think that this is a great time to get together with family members, the people who are really important to us, to get in touch with our feelings, to perhaps have some therapy, because the talky Mercury's in town, and also the relating Venus, or we might think about redecorating, or inviting people around and playing mind host, having some kind of celebration to do with the more emotional domain. That's all possible, and it can all happen in the next 13 weeks. But just be aware that what Neptune can do, we need to almost perceive it as being on the first 0 degree of Aries, really. What it can do is distort our desire to be individualistic, but also not perhaps quite take responsibility, and in terms of what we need to be doing to be protective to ourselves, nurture ourselves. How much time do we spend, because we're so caught up with technology, just tuning out, taking a breath, going to have some time in nature, particularly near water, of course. The sign of Cancer is very much about the environment, I feel. It's very much about our immediate senses. So atmospheric. Cancerians have a huge ability to walk into, say, a restaurant or a bar and just think, I don't like the vibe, and just walk straight out. And everyone else with them might think, well, it seems perfectly fine. So there's that very heightened intuition. With Neptune in the mix, that's going to be stronger, but it can almost be a little bit like the moon card in tarot, rather overwhelming and rather bogging us down. So what can we do positively to deal with these two mighty challenges? With Pluto being rather cold and distant and rather detached and rather too logical, and then we've got Neptune that's almost the other way, that can't wait to have another drink to deal with the harshness of what we're dealing with. How do we deal with it? Well, I think one of the things to understand is that don't ever underestimate the power of the sign of Cancer, nor the power of Cancerian people. This is a leader sign. You might think that Leo, because it's ruled by the Sun and has all the drama and the charisma, is the leader of the zodiac. Of course, in terms of being more playful and creative and sociable, absolutely. But home is where the heart is. So we've all got an opportunity to push away that rather detached energy of Pluto, push away that rather escapist energy of Neptune, and just immerse ourselves in what really gives us peace, quiet, tranquility, even a little bit of silence. Maybe enjoy doing some redecoration, particularly with Venus. Bring its style magic to the equation. Or if you're not someone who's been working from home, a home-based business, or in the locality, or perhaps spending more time in the garden, if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, a lovely time to really get things going well. If you are in the South, it may be a time to hunker down a little bit more, obviously depending on where the weather is up to. But just being much more conscious of the whole principle of nurturing and what we can gain from being supportive to one another, but also listening to our sixth sense, which is often guided by an imperceptibility. We don't necessarily see the challenge, but we just feel that something doesn't feel quite right, like that bar or restaurant. And that's what we're being encouraged to do over this next 13 weeks. Now, in terms of the event chart from a Placidus viewpoint, but that puts the Cancer guys, apart from the path of fortune, in house 6, where we need to be pragmatic. So maybe those homes, if things have slipped a little bit in terms of the cleaning, the tidying, the decluttering, that's an area that we can put the nurture towards. But the 6th house can, of course, be about physical health. It's not just about order. It can be about where we work. Can be about those pets. Can be about aunts and uncles in a more classical archetype of astrology. But seriously, the 6th house can be where we can be more conscious of the small details that we can change and become more attentive to, particularly with Mercury in the mix and its Virgoan attention to detail, that those small changes actually add something better and more enabling. So, you know, if you've got some clothes that you're not using anymore, if they're parcelled up and go to the charity shop, that's a great way to bring fresh energy in and really embrace the more healing vibe of Cancer, but also do something to help someone else. You can see that Pluto is in house 1. That's very much about us as individuals. Can be to do with our ego. Are we going to let our ego dominate, or I think our intellect? We've all met people. You know, if you go to a bar and someone has a vast knowledge about so many things, but actually is not very good at people or emotions. So we could encounter someone like that, or maybe that's the person inside us, and we're being asked to break free of the logic and get more in touch with the attunement of the sign of Cancer. But you can see that Neptune's in 2, and 2 can be about excesses in a way. It can be certainly appreciation of good food, but the 2nd house can also be, of course, about money, but our self-worth. If we're kidding ourselves about the reality of our resources, for example, I think what the Sun is saying back to Neptune here, well, actually, I'm going to try and find ways to be a little bit more careful with what I eat and drink. Don't be ruled by the escapism of Neptune or the mystique of Neptune. Don't be ruled by the coolness of Pluto. That's what the natal chart is saying to us. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect over the next incredibly important 13 weeks of the Western Tropical Astrological Year. So Aries, after a helter-skelter time recently, and particularly in June, when there's perhaps been lots of text messages and emails and instant messages and chat going backwards and forwards, it's probably been very, very stimulating. But if it has seemed so busy, it's been hard to catch your breath, this immediate next 4-week period will certainly be a time when you can appreciate bringing the pace of life down a little bit and just really giving yourself a moment to just get your bearings, because in a way that's what Cancer's about. Let's think about it. Aries, your sign, about initiation. Taurus, about gaining the foundations from that new start that Aries brings. Gemini's about how we interact with people, but now we need a little bit of time just to pause, think about where we live, who we live with and how. More family strands, perhaps more about our emotional needs. And all of those things can be so valuable. They're there all the time in our lives. It's just that's going to be the focus now, and in quite a big way. So if you have been thinking about having some changes done at home, or you have been thinking about using your imagination to create a different atmosphere, perhaps with some new paintwork or new furnishings, or new soft furnishings, this is certainly not going to be a surprise if you're active in that regard. But equally, if there has been a lot of interaction and bubbliness, not all of it has gone exactly to plan, has it? Because of the snags that Saturn and Neptune have been creating. Some of it perhaps to do with your own deep subconscious, perhaps to do with your past. Perhaps you've been talking about, thinking about, discussing a lot of things that are to do with your history. Now, if you just find yourself closing the door and having a little bit of peace, seclusion, or being with the people you don't have to try being with, those very solid citizens, or you are lucky enough to have a much loved pet, all of those things can be very soothing and harmonizing for you over the next few weeks. But if you are in the mood to actually change where you live, you want to move somewhere else, this could be a time when you take action, because what you're seeking to do is to find that special place where you can cocoon yourself away safely and feel that real sense of security, privacy, very important themes for you at this time. So Taurus, let's talk, because that's what you're being primed to do. But of course, the sign of Cancer is about feelings, so just chatting for chatting's sake is not going to be enough for you, particularly with your ruler in Cancer and also Mercury, the planet that rules interactions such as that. So the conversations you have need to have a sense of purpose. So you may find yourself, the third house is very much to do with siblings, but it can be to do with people that we're connecting online. Online is part of what our lives are about these days for many of us, and we can't exclude that. But the Cancerian energy is just saying that if we're chatting or we're reading or watching or consuming information that leaves us just feeling a bit washed out and drained, that's really not embracing the Cancerian principle of bringing a greater sense of peace and tranquility to our world. So if you do find yourself joining a new group, maybe in your community, third house, which is to do with crafting or some kind of artistic strand, this would be a marvellous time to start interacting with people who share your passion. But it's meaningful, it's something that brings something to life inside of you in terms of the engagement, which can be fun and exciting and uplifting, but also something that comes out of it, because you're often someone who is very, very good with the arts, with crafting and things like that. So that could be one strand for you. You may become a little bit more immersed in where you live in terms of some kind of contributory role or voluntary role, maybe even running the local Facebook group, because the third house is very much to do with those quick communications. But what about Neptune and Pluto? Well, Pluto's high and mighty in your chart, isn't it? It's on that 10th house cusp, and really since January, maybe you've had to confront some big realities about what you do for your living, or the demands that you have in your job, or if you work in a big corporation, the reality of that. What the third house energy can get you thinking about is, could you change things for yourself? Can you create more autonomy within the big picture? If you feel you can't, that could see you looking to sharpen up your skills, particularly to do with things like the digital interface, so that you can make yourself perhaps more employable. But also the third house can be about quick journeys, our interactions with our immediate locality. If you're someone who's quite sporty, that's going to be something that calls out to you at this time, especially if it's more explosive activities like circuit training or short runs or fast walks or cycling, very third house cycling, particularly with Mercury in the mix. So all those things can bring some bubbliness to your situation. But that position of Pluto suggests that if you do need to talk to anyone in a position of authority, you will need to be mindful of not rushing the conversation, which can be a little bit of a third house trait, because they may have quite a fixed, authoritative and traditional view of what they expect from you, even if you're coming up with an absolutely blindingly brilliant idea. What about Neptune? Well, Neptune and Saturn, unfortunately, have been making you more aware who is perhaps not quite the same cup of tea you used to think they are. And that can happen. We all go through changes. We're all evolving the whole time. My mum used to say, people are like ships that meet in the night, and slowly but surely one ship just chugs away from another. That can happen. There are some people that we just seem to be aligned to for very long periods of time, and those relationships are to be treasured. But they still have to grow and evolve. So I feel that if there has been a little bit of confusion or uncertainty about your future plans, your friendships or your connections, the third house energy in Cancer is asking you to think about it. Mercury, the Sun to a degree, that's more about action. But Venus is asking you to think about what you need in your relationships. And you could find yourself much more connected to people who share not just your passion for the arts or creativity, but maybe who have similar belief systems. Again, third house. Gemini, think about what you've been really feeling passionate about in the last month. It may be a hobby, it may be a person, it may be a sports team, it may be a particular group of friends that's proved to be very sparkly to be with. But whatever you felt really invested in terms of your individual talent, so if you felt right at the heart of things, you've got a wonderful opportunity now to manifest an outcome which sees something shape up in a more tangible way. Now, that would ordinarily be the case when the sun moves into Cancer each year, but this year, because your ruler Mercury is in house 2 for you, and also Venus, which is very much about house 2, money, but also self-worth, whether you start to manifest that thing in terms of it shaping up that gives you a lot of personal pleasure, or there is a financial improvement that's going to come from all that hard work, dedication that you've been showing, that's really down to your unique circumstances. But that doesn't mean to say the journey over the last few weeks hasn't been without its bumps and the bumps in the road, because of course Saturn and Neptune have been asking some big demanding questions. You may have encountered someone through Saturn who just didn't seem to get it, what you were expressing. They may have seemed cool, disinterested, aloof, maybe even a little bit off with you in some way, and then perhaps you became even more disenfranchised or disenchanted because your physical vitality, by just keeping going with pushing outwards with this great idea or strategy you've had, just seemed to evaporate away. And there could be a little bit of that still around, to be honest, but it's because Venus and Mercury are sat right close to the sun when this new 13-week quarter begins. That's the significant thing. So expect something really delightful. If you've really put the effort in recent weeks and months, something really delightful can shape up for you over the next quarter. Now, I have to say for you, Cancer, I think that this event is going to be one you really appreciate. You've probably already felt some uplift through the arrival of Venus, making you feel even more gorgeous, and Mercury, seeing you get those ideas which have been a little bit trapped on the back burner come sparkling into life. So that's a magnificent combination. The sun coming in to join them, that's really terrific. You're going to feel much more energized over the next 4 weeks. But what will the next 13 weeks hold for you? How can you use this collective to your advantage? Well, remember, you are a cardinal sign. You're a sign of leadership, and you have great authority. You know, people might think, you know, that old thing that I'm always saying about Cancer people that I really think is not fair, you know, that you can only be chained to the kitchen sink making homemade apple pie. You know, it's just not true. Your appreciation of resources, your appreciation of managing things very carefully is sensational. A lot of people in executive positions are Cancers, and of course every home has an executive, and that's the person who makes sure that it runs well. And these days that obviously can be more nuanced about who takes on that role, but certainly the home is part of the equation for Cancerian energy, but most of all it's instinctive. And if you think that your instincts, when you go against them, is when things don't work out so well for you. And I think recently there has been a lot of potential for feeling quite run down, a little bit sort of low in drive, feeling very sensitive, not sure about what other people are feeling. The energy that we all collectively download from the ether, but most of all from technology and all the things that are seeking our attention, those kind of energies have been very wearing for you of late, and you may have found that you needed to retreat a little bit in order to get through them. But whatever you've been going through from a personal viewpoint, a professional viewpoint, a family viewpoint, an energetic viewpoint, this is a new beginning. But it's not necessarily going to be a new beginning with no complications, of course. And the energy of Pluto, for example, in House 8 is where we're devoted. House 1 is where we need to invest in us as individuals. You could get a challenge as soon as this weekend when, of course, we have the full moon in Capricorn. So that's opposite your sign, and someone may accuse you of being too single-minded in your approach. But this is the time when you do need to be single-minded. Neptune has been creating that disorientation, that draining energy. So the great thing I can tell you is that you're going to move into the present. You're going to be more determined to take the decisions you need to take for you. Be less concerned about the people who don't get you, their judgments, their doubts, but any inner doubts that you've had, or any self-defeating messages you may have been letting crowd your own thinking, you can push that more to one side now and really go for it in a very determined way. So Leo, each year the sun reaches a point in its journey, its circuit, where it's prompting us to just take a bit of a pause, and that begins for you on this event. So for the next 4 weeks in particular, you may find yourself mulling things over in quite a profound way. Now, if you're someone who's really into healing, personal development, retreats, having treatments, spa days, being very much in nature, having some time out to recharge your batteries will just be perfectly timed over this period for you. But of course, the whole period is for 13 weeks. So it's essentially saying to you that the energy you've had recently in Gemini has been potentially very bright. You may have made quite a lot of new connections, and some of these are going to stick around for the long term. Unfortunately, you've probably found out also that some of those people were not necessarily quite as aligned to you as you may have hoped, and that could even be some long-standing relationships that are going to start to begin to change. And just being really truthful with you, Venus and Mercury in House 12 can be where we're thinking about our romantic connections in a different way, and we can also experience the need to have a separation if things haven't been working very well. And if you think that Pluto is aligning to the Sun on this event and has been in a quincunx to Mercury and Venus in quite a powerful way since they moved on the 17th of June into Cancer, it's possible that if there have been some doubts around certain involvements, they've come up in quite a big way. Even if you haven't seen anything tangible, it may be more the sense that something's shifting that you can't even perceptibly see. But the 12th house can be an area of huge growth. Yes, it can be the sector of, in traditional astrology, of hidden enemies, so to speak, but also it can be where we become much more attuned to the parts of us that we may find a bit difficult to grapple with. You know, everyone has bits of their nature that are more difficult to integrate, that we don't feel as comfortable with, perhaps don't even like. We may even feel quite inadequate or inferior or have anxieties, all part of the human mix. And all of those have an opportunity over this next period of time for you to work on them, to dive in and get much more up close and intimate with them, and don't judge them and bring them into who you are in a more holistic way. Because, Leo, one of your great strengths is the fact that you manifest this aura that people find very, very difficult to ignore, and it's something very, very special about you. But also there's part of you that can have a lot of pride, and that means that sometimes you can be very protective of your image because you're fearful that someone will think the worst of you, will judge you in some way, and not necessarily come up to the what you see as the standard, the mark. So just be cautious of that. But if there is a situation where you do need to let go and have a period of separation, move on and to start preparing for a new future once the sun moves into your sign in 4 weeks, then that is part of the year that you've now entered. Virgo, there's been lots of opportunities recently to raise your profile, to be much more attuned to where you can display your talents, where you can attract more appreciation for those qualities, those gifts, those skills. And if you are someone who very much is committed to making progress professionally, it's probably been a very important time for you. Not necessarily a totally easy time, because of course Saturn in your 7th house of relating and Neptune as well, they've been skewing things somewhat, so it may not necessarily have been so easy to pitch your ideas in quite the way you wanted, or someone's not received them as you want, or someone may not quite understood who you are, or felt a little bit threatened because you wanted to be more ambitious, when they've perhaps been more attuned to you being a solid player that goes through the processes, because really you've been pushed to receive more acclaim. But with this event, you're really getting an opportunity, particularly with your ruler Mercury so close to the Sun, but also Venus, to have some fun. So particularly over the next 4 weeks, but also over the next 13, try to build up your connections to others. Try to find areas of commonality. We're all incredibly linked. We think we're all incredibly individual, which of course we are in some ways, but we all have the same organs, we have the same challenges, we also have the same opportunities. So those commonalities is something that you can celebrate. So even if, for example, you are in a relationship which is not absolutely perfect, just really think about, look, I'm very fortunate to have these strands within that are really good and pleasing. But if you are someone who's very, very idealistic, however successful you are or have been, or however much you've been caught up with the professional or worldly interactions of late, you could find yourself wanting something more now. And that intangible thing is quite a spiritual thing. It's a higher truth. It's about connecting with a part of ourselves that really gives us some kind of higher purpose that is really very, very sweet. And you have an opportunity to grasp that over the next 4 weeks particularly, but also the next 13 too. So Libra, what do you share in common with the sign of Cancer? You're a cardinal sign too. You're a sign of leadership too. You may have a reputation of being somewhat of a people pleaser, or if you're more single-minded, the chances are you've got a lot of Scorpio in your chart. But you know, seriously, part of what makes you very unique is that you're looking for a balance. You're looking for an equanimity in whatever you do. And if things are out of kilter, that makes you feel uneasy. But sometimes we have to recognize the qualities we have and not overanalyze them, and actually just be really quite coolly appraising of what we've got to offer. And that's what I want you to do over the next 13 weeks. I want you to think, look, what is it that I can offer, that I think I can deliver in a different way to some of the other people I interact with, particularly professionally, because the Sun, Mercury and Venus, your ruler, are all in your 10th house. That's where we raise our profile. It is about the worldly connection. It's the sunlight part of your chart in terms of the northern hemisphere. And for you, although ironically it's in the sign of Cancer, so it's about feeling, but you can use that perception and that knowledge of how to relate and build alliances, which is your great gift, and be very inclusive. You can still thrust forwards whatever it is you want to achieve, whether it's something to do with your social world, your romantic situation, your interest, a sporting pursuit that you follow, or it is more about the type of role you have, the status you have, the earnings you have, where you actually physically live. All of those things come under the astral microscope in a big way. But you're being asked not to overanalyze things. You're being asked to show confidence because you're a cardinal sign. You're a leader sign. So if there's a big prize you really have got in your mind, really set your intentions to get in it, because you can. So Scorpio, this is a particularly exciting event for you because the ninth house represents adventure, independence, but also it represents some freedom. It's lighter than the eighth house energy that's been playing out recently, which has a kind of flavour of your sign. It's very much to do with where we're most invested, but it also can be where we need to transcend and change. Change can be painful, particularly if there's parts of our life that we prefer to stick with what we know. And of course, because your fifth house, which is where we take risk or we're more calculated with the speculation that we go for, whether it is around our social situation, romance, or our finance, that's been dominated for the last year and a quarter by the restrictive Saturn, and previously since 2012 from the confusion at times Neptune. So you may have had some magical experiences creatively or even romantically at times since 2012, but also some crushing disappointments. So recently your desire to feel really, connected somehow, whether it's intimately, whether it's things are moving forward financially, whether you feel recognized for your talents, it's been very intense and not necessarily very easy. So now you have an opportunity to do something completely different, to be absolutely totally spontaneous. Now, whether it is to head off to the coast with some friends, or go on a city break with someone you're close to, or to plan a long distance break, or to start researching something that you've got a real passion for, particularly around history, genealogy, things like that, can really spark out for you. But most of all, you just need to relish every minute of your newfound freedom. Sagittarius, so the Sun, Mercury and Venus all in House 8. House 8 is very profound. House 7 is very much to do with how we relate. Now, some Sagittarians have been saying to me, absolutely no relating stuff going on at all. And do you know, because Saturn's in House 4, which is your emotions, Neptune there too, potential for a little bit of confusion or uncertainty, mixed messages. Saturn can be very limiting. If you've had a lot of family responsibilities, it's not been so easy in terms of perhaps you're developing something physically where you're living, or even struggling. It's not so affordable as you would like, or not so comfortable. Those things may have been consuming your energy in quite a big way in recent weeks, despite the glittering array of astrological celestial talent in your sector of relating. But if you have had some moments of connection, what you're really being offered a chance of now is to discover whether the things that have been shared, the delightful encounters, the flirty, very Gemini energy that's been exchanged, whether it has any basis in a deeper meaning. So if you have met someone relatively recently, you really like them, you want to find out if this can become something that you can become much more invested in, because you are a sign that doesn't give away your freedom easily. So if there is someone that you've been attracted to, you're now going to want to explore much more deeply whether there is an option to forge that deeper alliance. But of course, the seventh house can also be where we set our boundaries. And if you've been pushing back from unwelcome attention recently, perhaps now you can change your focus to a more internal time for you, a time when you can work out your motivations, the more psychological part of your situation. And in a practical sense, the eighth house can be brilliant for things like investments, pensions, legacies, shared resources, entrepreneurship. All of those things can come to life for you over the next 13 weeks. But when it comes to relationships, it has to mean something, or it probably is not going to be enough. Capricorn, it's really exciting for you because the collective in the sign of Cancer now is House 7. And particularly having Venus there, because Venus rules the seventh house, so that brings the potential for greater equanimity, a little bit more harmonizing energy, bit of give and take, trying to find some balance. Not all about getting what you need, but it's not all about the other person getting what they need. And also with Mercury there, it's let's talk, whereas Mercury in House 6 is let's get stressed. It's very brittle, and because it's been squaring up with your ruler and also the watery energies of Neptune in 3, things may have felt quite on edge recently. But you do also have an opportunity with House 7 to set boundaries. I don't feel it is just about relationships. I think it's also about where we say what our minimum requirement is, and therefore having a strong understanding of what those boundaries should be. So whether it is at work, just always being agreeable isn't a good thing, because we end up being the person that always gets put on. We try to push back, that creates resentment. So having a good, healthy sense of ourselves is vital to the process. And that's where the full moon comes in your sign later this week, which gives you protection to make sure that you don't give away your autonomy, your power too much in being too much caught up in being a people pleaser. But if you're someone who is pretty good at knowing what you want and where you stand, what this collective is saying to you is that if you can be more attuned to other people, sharpen up your listening skills, try to understand where they're coming from, even if it's very different to you, there's lots of valuable gains from that immediately for the 4 weeks, but of course for the longer 13 weeks too. Also, you can build up alliances, collaboration, cooperation, and that can be in a non-romantic way. It can be business partnership, it can be new clients you meet or customers. Your ability to work well with people effectively is definitely going to blossom. However, on the back of the full moon, just being really honest, if there is a relationship where you do not feel heard, that's going to be a big thing, which I will tell you more about on that full moon video coming soon. Aquarius, you've had a period of the year where the 5th house energy has been potentially very sociable and interactive. Of course, it depends what's going on in your situation. If you've been in good form, feeling well, not had too many obligations and responsibilities, you've probably, since the start of June, had some really bright encounters. Of course, as the month has gone on, the energy in House 2, Saturn, your traditional ruler, and the dreamy Neptune, probably brought a bit more sharply into focus some financial realities, especially if you have wanted to be much more generous and free-spirited and bubbly, or spoil someone that you're really drawn to. So what's going on with House 6 with this collective moving into Cancer? Well, it is a little bit more pragmatic for sure. It is about the smaller details, but with Mercury in the mix as well, you have an asset, because Mercury rules the 6th zodiac sign of Virgo, and that's very much about all those details, that virtue. So the issue is the role of Pluto in your sign, which has been giving you a lot of extra push to manifest your intense individuality. The 6th house can be more self-sacrificing. It's more about what we can do to support others, provide services, live our lives in quite a balanced way, make sure that we're eating and drinking and sleeping the right things when you've just gone through such a dramatic time, when really being pushed to indulge and play has been the central theme. But also part of the journey of the Sun, Mercury, Venus and Jupiter in Gemini has been very creative. And if you have been showcasing your talents or developing new ideas, it may be the case that you need to mould them into something that's a bit more pragmatic. It doesn't mean to say the original germ of the idea isn't brilliant, because it could well be precisely that, but it's still got to have an application that other people can relate to. So the refinement to your plan could be the next phase of this year. If you're in a job which is crushing your passion and isn't giving you much satisfaction, that may be an area that you do want to look at too. And if you have been indulging and having a bit too many late nights, a great time to try to get some early ones. Look at what you're eating and drinking and your exercise. All that stuff is 6th house, but with the host being Cancer, it has to feel right for you. So whatever you do, make sure it feels right for you. So Pisces, the move of the Sun, Mercury and Venus all into your 5th house is absolutely fantastic. Now, of course, every time we have the summer solstice, the Cancer solstice, the Sun moves into your 5th house, which is an opportunity for you to be more outgoing, more playful, be a bit more self-expressive, because the fourth house, the Gemini energy, is about stop. It is more Cancerian, so there is a bit of a paradox there. So the fifth house is where you want to connect with people more, but because Mercury and Venus are in the mix this year, and of course Venus is a planet which is exalted in your sign, this is a great chance for you, a really super chance over the next 13 weeks to showcase your sparkle and whatever talents, abilities, flair and creativity you have. Don't be fearful of really pushing forwards with an extra slice of self-confidence and self-belief. So do set your intentions around those things. Just be aware that Pluto in house 12 is very, very psychological. It had a big jolt as Pluto met Mars. Something may have come up into the open to do with your past, to do with old stuff, to do with hurts or deeply held down old issues. That may have seen something come up which may have been a bit jarring. And of course there may have also been some very low energy recently because of Neptune, your ruler, clashing with a whole series of planets in Gemini, and you may have been a little bit befuddled in some ways and unsure about exactly what you should do. So what you get now is the flame, fifth house, the flame, fire of the sun, which is what the fifth house is about, but through the prism of feeling, which is something you have a great appreciation for, being a water sign. So you can really go for it now and be much more outgoing and expressive, and don't analyze things too much. There is a big gear change going on here cosmically, I agree, because the fourth house is seeing you perhaps very protective and wary, and I'm saying you should just go for it in quite a dramatic way, and it may not necessarily be an exact straightforward pathway, but over the next few days, as the sun escapes the clutches of Pluto and also Neptune, you will feel that your sense of optimism, brightness and desire to be with people and have some company and be more playful, that is going to come to the fore in a big way, and it can do, not just for the next 4 weeks, but for the next 13 too. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me for this Cancer summer solstice. And remember, if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now and click that subscription button and the bell notification symbol. Take care, all the best and goodbye.